tonight because he always comes by on Wednesday night and brings Popeye fried chicken, as you know, and Publix fried chicken. But he didn't show up tonight. And I brought him some prunes. I actually brought him some prunes. I was going to say, I brought you, since you never bring anything for me to eat, I brought you something to eat. Brian, and he's not here. So the good thing about prunes is it'll last till I see him. Because he'll be by tomorrow. But so we all know what prunes look like, right? They're ugly. It's an ugly, they're wrinkled, they're shriveled. You know, why did the raisin take the prune to the prom? Because he couldn't get a date. Hey, there you go. Okay, wonka wonka. That's right. You know, I look at how did they get prune juice out of this thing? I mean, this is and why is prune juice called fossil fuel? Can somebody explain that one to me? But I just don't get it. But you know, sometimes I don't know about you, but I have a day that looks like this. I really do. I mean, just a kind of a dried prune kind of day. I know people that kind of has a dried prune kind of life. You know, and the thing about a dried prune is there is nothing you can do to make this thing look any better. I mean, it's just sometimes you have a day like that. Maybe you're having that kind of experience right now. You feel a little shriveled up. You feel like life is just ugly. It just couldn't get any worse. It's not working. Well, when that happens, there's a miracle that God wants to work in your life. And we're going to talk about a miracle tonight. We're doing a new Bible study that was suggested by one of our Tuesday morning tenders, Jim, and I just love it because I can come up with a bunch of ideas for Bible study. Pastor James can come up with a bunch of ideas for Bible study, but when you come up with an idea for Bible study, that just makes me. I get excited. I have dreams. The kind of dreams I have is like there's a line for people to get in for Bible study. That's a dream that I have. And I have a dream that there's people coming up to me afterwards and they say, do a Bible study on this, do a Bible study on this, do a Bible study on that. So when one person comes up to me, I'm very excited because that's probably the closest I'm going to get for it being a dream come true. But Jim said, we talk about all these major people, David and Moses and all these people, Jonah and everything else. But how about all these other people that you mentioned their names, and I've never heard these names before? Could we do a Bible study on lesser known names in the Bible? And I said, I love that one. So the one we'll look at tonight is maybe a name that you've never heard of before, but it's a great miracle. I mean, it's just a great miracle. We're calling this Bible study Great Lessons from the Less Known. I was going to call it I'll take lesser known people in the Bible for 200, Alex, but we just couldn't get all that on the church program. So we made it shorter. And speaking about, okay, suppose you're on the TV game show Jeopardy. Everybody here, anybody watch Jeopardy? 7:30 Jeopardy comes on. You know something that you've never experienced on Jeopardy, though we were talking about people from Perry, is that I have never heard a contestant with a Southern accent. Anybody? I have never, I'll take Shakespeare for 1,000. Never heard that. Never heard it. I just found out they have something called Canadian Jeopardy. It's almost the same, only your answers must be in the form of an apology. So you guys got that. But here's my favorite part of watching Jeopardy is when they always start off with the $200 category. I'm old enough. I remember there used to be a $100 category. Now it's inflation. But and so that's the easy. And you always get the first one. And what do you always say once you get that $200 clue, which is on about one of the only 3 topics you know anything about in your entire life? You always say, I should be what? I should be on Jeopardy. And then you don't get anything else for the rest of the show, But you always say that. Or somebody turns to you and goes, well, you should be on Jeopardy. You don't tell them you've already watched this when it's a rerun. It's syndication. I'm always going, they go, this is Jeopardy. And I go, buzz in. What's the name of the show? And that's usually the only one I get right, the whole thing. I've always wondered, though, if you could be on Jeopardy and you could pick the categories, what categories would you pick? So I was thinking about that. Because Pastor James actually put a little thing in the program for Sunday for Jeopardy, and I can tell you, he took the time to type in all the little categories up there. They're really good ones. None of them that I would pick, because I would pick. This would be my Jeopardy categories: Homer Simpson, fried chicken, colors that end in Urkel, Dollywood, barbecue and quantum physics. No, okay, no. The last one would not be quantum physics. It would be mice named Mickey. Now this would be my categories. And but here you are. You're tied with the reigning champion. There's only one category left: famous Bible characters. And you go, thank you, Pastor Gene. I got this one. I've been going to Bible study. I know this. I know famous Bible characters. I've read Adam and Eve, Moses, Abraham, David, Solomon. Oh, the daily double bells are already ringing in your ears. You just can't wait. And you're just about ready to press the button and say, I'll take famous Bible characters for 200, and you look and you go, oh no, it doesn't say famous Bible characters. It says not so famous Bible characters. Now, are you still going to win? Or is your buzzer going to stay silent? If your knowledge of obscure Bible personalities is a little lacking, or you'd like to learn more about some really real people that stood behind the spotlight instead of in it, then for the next few weeks, this Bible study is going to be for you. I was just going through the Old Testament, just writing down names of people we don't talk about. Naaman, Jabez, Josiah, Jonathan, Ehud. Ehud's the only left-handed guy mentioned in the entire Bible, by the way. Left-handed guy named Ehud. Asaph and the sons of Korah. Don't that sound like a rock group? I'd buy a ticket to go hear Asaph and the sons of Korah. James, I would. I bet that'd be pretty good. Turns out that the sons of Korah, they hated Moses so much. So, and they actually wrote one of the Psalms. There's actually one of the Psalms, the book of Psalms, that was written by Asaph and the sons of Korah. There's Jethro, and nothing to do with the Beverly Hillbillies. Elishama. Now, let me tell you what's so cool about Elishama. In 1986, a guy found outside the city of Jerusalem, they found this clay seal. And the clay seal said on it, Elishama, servant of the king. Proving that there was a scribe, just like there's a scribe named Elishama in the Bible, in the exact time setting and situation that Scripture describes. And they found it with this guy's name on it, Elishama. So there you go. It just sounds good when it rolls off your tongue. Jonathan's armor bearer. Don't even tell us what his name is. But I love Jonathan's armor bearer. I mean, this guy is it's just amazing. I only got a couple of verses about him. Balaam. We got two guys named Bezalel and Aholiab. Now, why is Bezalel and Aholiab so important? Those are the first two artists ever mentioned in the Bible. So if you love to paint or you love music or whatever, these are the first two. And God said, I've given you these special gifts. That lets us know that one of the spiritual gifts that God gives to people is artistic gifts. Micaiah, we know who Micah is, and Nahum, and Zechariah, and all those minor prophets. But there was another guy, and just because he didn't take the time to write everything down, because he was too busy staying alive, because King Ahab was trying to kill him, was a guy by the name of Micaiah. He was one of the prophets, the minor prophets of the 10th century, and he's the one that God said, you are going to prophesy against King Ahab and Jezebel. And he goes, I would rather not. and so you need to learn about him. Speaking of Jezebel, Jezebel had a daughter who was named Athaliah. Athaliah was King Ahab's and Jezebel's daughter. And she's the most wicked woman in the Bible. You've probably never heard of her. But she's the most wicked woman in the Bible. We may talk a little bit about her next week. Because somebody come up to me yesterday and they said, how bad did she have to be that you would say she was bad? And I'll tell you why she was bad. There's two girls or two ladies, or whatever they're called, Zelophehad's daughters. Now, who are Zelophehad's daughters? Well, there's a whole story about them in the Bible. They actually stood up to Moses on behalf of God. Moses was the wrong one, and they were speaking for God, not Moses. That's an interesting little story that's in the Bible. Jael. Oh, love the story of Jael. Has nothing to do with Superman. But Jael was the woman that had the strength, and you didn't want to go camping with her. That's all I'll say if we ever talk about Jael. How about Potiphar's wife? What happens when you're rich and bored? Potiphar's wife, that's a great story. Rahab, Tamar, Sapphira. Now that's 20 names right there, just from the Old Testament. I hadn't even got started yet. Hadn't even mentioned anybody in the New Testament. So I thought for Bible study we would do all 20 of these names. What do y'all think? Y'all like that idea? Oh, y'all are too easy. You know we're not going to do that. We'll pick 5 or 6 of them to do this. But here is a great lesser known guys in 2 Kings, the 5th chapter. And I put some of the scriptures on your outline. Have you ever been mistaken? Have you ever mistaken someone for somebody else? Has that ever happened to you? There was a drunk guy. He was walking down the street and he sees this nun and he runs over and knocks her over and says, "You don't feel so tough now, do you, Batman?" Okay, but years ago when Celebration was a bit smaller, after church we'd all go over to R.J. Mackey's. It's not there anymore. It used to be a breakfast place off of Goodland, and we go there for brunch. If you're at church, we'd all go over there. So many of the people, not everyone that was in that little restaurant, had attended Celebration Church that morning. So I like to go in, and I wouldn't even eat. I'd go in and make the rounds. I call it schmoozing. I like to go in and schmooze because I don't get a chance to talk to anybody at the park. So anytime, I guess why I love Bible studies so much. So the only time I get a chance to speak to anybody. And so I was going around that Sunday morning, just dressed like I normally do on Sunday morning. And I walked in and I saw this elderly couple sitting there, and they both had on tropical, garb. So I'm going, they must have been at church. So I sat down and just began talking to them 100 miles an hour. I bet Eddie says I talked for about 15 minutes, didn't even come up for air. Just talking about how great church was and the mackerel music and the dogs. And we had some banjos that Sunday morning. So I talked about the jugs and the banjos at church and everything. And then after about 15 minutes of nonstop talking, my wife finally leaned and whispered in my ear, "Those people weren't at church today." So I looked at them, and they're just shell-shocked. Okay, they were sitting down there to eat. And I went, "I know what you're thinking. There's never a cop around when you need one." But just welcome to Naples, the friendliest town in the whole U.S. of A. And I said, "We got to go." and I left. But have you ever mistaken someone for somebody else? It's great if somebody mistakes you for Jimmy Buffett or Garth Brooks, which has never happened to me. I have been mistaken for a homeless person more than once. I've actually picked up some spare change. But just asking the greeters, they all got stories where people come and they say, so who's the pastor? And now they just point to James. They don't even point, but they used to. They would point to me, and the people would go, "No, really, seriously, we're not joking." Who are they? But every day you encounter many different kinds of people. Some are delightful, some are difficult, some are inspiring, some are irritating. One of my more acute observations of being in the ministry now, it's been 50 years. Because I started when I was 18 years of age. I was filling in as a supply pastor. So now y'all can do the math. But is that what I found out is nobody's normal. Everybody's whacked out to some degree. Flawed, weird, odd, strange. I've met people that are just downright creepy. And if you're an exception to that rule, that just means you don't have you lack the self-awareness to know that you are the, nobody's normal. You might look normal on the outside, but inside we all have an inner weirdo. All right, anybody with me? Okay, I know there's not a bunch of us here tonight, but just stay with me. Have you ever met someone like, for example, that they got to argue about everything? I heard about one guy who was so argumentative, he would only eat food that disagreed with him. That's how argumentative with him. So sometimes I'm messy. I am flawed. I'm weirdo. They say 1 out of every 3 people have mental problems. So if you're sitting somewhere one day and the person's on your left and right, they seem normal. Okay, but when you have an awareness, and this is what we're getting out of our Bible study tonight, once you have an awareness of your own faults, what happens is that you tend to lower the bar for everybody else. You tend to be more compassionate. You actually find yourself being more forgiving for other people when you have awareness of just of your own faults. I used Charles Stanley as an example yesterday. Charles Stanley's a great pastor First Baptist in the land and everything, but very judgmental kind of guy for many, many years. Actually wrote a whole book about sins and how if you basically went through a divorce, you were kind of a second-class person. And guess what happened to him later on down the road? He went through a divorce. He then wrote another book about a year later after that. And the whole book was asking for forgiveness. I think it's one of the best books he ever wrote. It's called, I think it's called Adversaries, the name of the book. But the thing about it is, because of his own faults, he lowered the bar and became much more compassionate and forgiving to other people. So that's what's going to happen to our lesser known person tonight. His name is Naaman. We begin in 2 Kings 5. Now Naaman was commander of the army of the king of Aram. Now Aram is Syria today, the Syrian Empire. In fact, that was a huge empire. They had the best military in the world at that time. They'd beaten the Egyptians, they'd beaten the Syrians, they'd beaten everybody. So Naaman was commander of the army of the king of Aram. He was a great man in the sight of his master and highly regarded, because through him the Lord had given victory to Aram. He was a valiant soldier, but he had leprosy. Now, bands from Aram had gone out and had taken captive a young girl from Israel, and she served Naaman's mistress. And she said to her mistress, "If only my master would see the prophet who was in Samaria, he would cure him of his leprosy." So I want to pause here just for a moment. I want you to think about all that Naaman has and who Naaman is. We're reading about him here, one of the high points of his life. We actually have Naaman has been mentioned in extra biblical writings. So we know that he was a real historical figure, great general, great commander. So his troops have just met Israel in battle. Naaman has just defeated Israel's armies, 180,000 Israeli soldiers that he has just defeated. He's just killed Israel's king, who was King Ahab, by the way. He personally killed King Ahab. Naaman did. He's the guy who killed him. He has enormous power, because he's not just a military man, but he's risen in the ranks to become general commander of the army of Aram. The Bible calls him a great man. In this part of the world we now call Syria. Now that kind of advancement didn't happen by accident, just like it doesn't happen by accident, now. So he was a master strategist. If there was a hill that needed to be taken, a battle that needed to be won, Naaman would always figure out how to do it. He was also savvy enough to master all the political infighting, so that he emerged as the #1 guy. In fact, you didn't remain king without his permission. Okay? He was shrewd. He had status. He was highly regarded. When I think of him, I think like somebody maybe like General George Patton, or maybe David Petraeus, great general. But this means that he would have had all the rewards in those days that went along with all that. So he would have been tremendously wealthy, probably one of the most wealthy people in the entire world at this time. He would have been noble. He would have been nobility. He would have numbered among the nobility. He would have been envied, admired, flattered, feared. He had courage. We just read he was a valiant soldier. He was not, we know from other writings that he was someone who would be in the front lines with the troops. He relished the heat of the action. He loved to be in the middle of problems. There was no difficulty, military, financial, vocational, political. There was no problem he could not master. No challenge he could not overcome. He was Naaman. You know what his title was? His title was Naaman the Magnificent. How's that for a title? That's what we have from the writings. He was called Naaman the Magnificent. He was smart, determined, persistent, courageous, and he came back from war against Israel with unlimited influence, nationwide fame, immense wealth, unrivaled power. He came back with one other thing. He had a little patch of discolored skin on his hand. And that little patch of discolored skin turned the whole world of Naaman the Magnificent upside down. You have to understand the irony of this. This guy controls armies. He intimidates nations. He holds kings' life and death in his hands. He can plan, endure, buy, bribe, overpower, and intimidate his way through anything except this. And let me tell you, this story happened over 3,000 years ago, and I still see the same thing in Naples today. People that think if I can have enough money in the bank, if my retirement is big enough, if my house is big enough, my car is big enough, my boat's big enough, I can control everything about my life. And then what happens? All it takes is a stroke. All it takes is a heart attack. All it takes is a little discolored patch on the skin, and you realize you don't control anything. you realize you can't even control the next breath that you take. Now you have to understand ancient leprosy. It started out as just small red spots on the skin. And before too long, those spots would get bigger, and then they would turn white. And they would get kind of like a shiny appearance to them. And as they got bigger, they start joining together and just killing everything as they joined together. And pretty soon, these spots would spread over your whole body. Your hair would fall out, and then fingernails and toenails would become loose, and they would rot and fall off. Fingers and toes would rot and fall off piece by piece. Your gums would shrink. Your teeth would fall out because they couldn't hold your teeth in anymore. Leprosy would eat away at all your soft tissue first. So that's your nose, your palate, even the eyes rotted. And the victim just wasted away to death. And there was no cure. This little patch of discolored skin on his hand, this was a message from reality. Reality is he's a lump of clay walking around on two legs, and he never counted on this. The sores would ulcerate. The stench was intolerable. You couldn't talk. The vocal cords would be eaten up. You'd lose all your sensation and all your nerve endings. And there was no cure. In the ancient world, the very first signs of leprosy was regarded as a death sentence. We have stories of people it was the priest that would diagnose if you had leprosy. And it didn't matter what religion you were, leprosy was feared by the Egyptians, Assyrians, Israelites, everybody in the known world. But just as soon as you were given that diagnosis that you had leprosy, they would then have your funeral that same day because you were dead. There was no cure, no miracles, nothing. You were dead. You couldn't go home, couldn't go back to your house. You couldn't touch your wife one more time. You couldn't kiss your kids one more time. You couldn't make a living. You had to live out in a colony. And if you did ever leave from that colony, you'd have to take a bell with you and ring it and go, unclean. Unclean. Remember the story of Jesus and the 10 lepers? Unclean, because they had to let everybody know so that everybody could get out of the way. Now that's what Naaman has. You talk about going from hero to zero, just like that, and there's nothing he can do about it. All his brains, courage, wealth, power, status, he's going to die. Now he brought one other possession with him back from Israel. He brought a slave girl, a little slave girl. And she hears that Naaman has leprosy. He's going to die. Now let me ask you a question. How would you feel if you were that little slave girl and you just heard that Naaman was going to die? Think about it. She has been dragged away from her home. She's now a slave. Her mother and father were probably killed. All the people she knows and loves. She has lost all of her dreams. She'll never get married. She'll never have children. She'll never have a home. She's now a slave. Who did that to her? Naaman is the man who did this to her. He's at the very top of the ladder. She's at the very bottom of the ladder. She's a slave girl. And all this is his fault. So if I was her and I heard that he had leprosy, I would be going, thank you, Jesus. He didn't even know Jesus yet. I'm going, thank you, Jesus. Yes, there is justice in this world. And could you blame her? I know you could. I mean, my goodness, I would want Naaman to die, and I want him to die just like that. I really would. But that's not a reaction, is it? Here's another one of these little-known people in the Bible. We don't even know her name. Just some Israelite slave girl. But she has a heart that is so humble, she even wants this guy to live. I can't imagine that. I wish I knew more about this girl. At least knew her name. Because I think she's one of the most amazing people in the entire Bible. That she could have that kind of heart. She tells his wife, there's a man I know. His name is Elisha. And Elisha knows God. He's filled with the power of God. And he could heal Naaman. Now, you got to picture Naaman's response. Elisha is an Israelite. Israel is the country that Naaman has just done what? He just went in and just defeated it. He just killed so many people. He's killed their king. I mean, he's the enemy. If you want to put this in kind of a contemporary sense, think for a moment of the shock that would be involved if the Ayatollah in Iran was to go to Israel and ask for medical help. That'd be a bit of a shocker, wouldn't it? Well, that gives you something of the sense of the shock that would be involved with Naaman going to Israel for healing. And also, here's a slave girl telling him what to do. When's the last time anyone's ever told Naaman what to do? It's been a long time. And he's definitely not used to taking directions from slave girls. But guess what? He's still got this little patch. So what's he going to do? So let's read on. And Naaman went to his master, went to the king, told him what the girl from Israel had said. By all means go, the king of Aram replied. I will send a letter to the king of Israel. So Naaman left, taking with him 10 talents of silver, 6,000 shekels of gold, and 10 sets of clothing. The letter that he took to the king of Israel read, with this letter I am sending my servant Naaman to you, so that you, notice he's going to cure him, so that you can cure him of his leprosy. So Naaman goes to the king, explains the situation. The king says, I'll write a letter to the king of Israel. You realize, Naaman, the letter's got to be written to the new king, because you personally killed the old king. Are you sure this is a good idea, Naaman? Okay? But Naaman takes this letter from the king of Syria to the king of Israel, and the text says that he brought along with him 750 pounds of silver, 150 pounds of gold, and 10 sets of clothing to the king. The new king is apparently something of a clothes horse. And Naaman stops off at Nordstrom's on his way out of town, and he picks all this stuff up. This is about almost $2 million worth of stuff. Even the silver and gold, almost over $1.2 million. But Naaman's got it. He's got almost unlimited wealth. He's going to use this money to buy back what? I got enough money I can buy back my life. I can intimidate. So the Bible says, as soon as the king of Israel read the letter, now the king is King Jehoram, and we'll see his name again if we talk about the most wicked woman in the Bible. Because guess who Jehoram's wife was? Athaliah, the most wicked woman in the Bible. So they're all anyway, he tore his robes and said, am I God? Can I kill and bring back to life? Why does this fellow send someone to me to be cured of leprosy? See how he's trying to pick a quarrel with me. So the new king of Israel gets this letter, and he's not happy with it. He tore his robes. We don't do that so much in our society today, but what they did in that day, that was an indication of great anguish. In our day, it would be he went to his therapist, or he took some royal Valium, something like that. But in those days, there was no therapist, there was no Valium, so you just tore your robes. It was a simpler time, okay? Maybe that's why they needed 10 new outfits. Maybe, Jehoram, he was just a robe tearer, okay? Now, when kings tore their robes in those days, people got scared. People got very nervous, because that meant the king was probably going down. And if the king was going down, as a general rule, a whole lot of people were going to go down with him. So if a king starts tearing his robe, that makes news. So word spreads, and Elijah hears about it. Remember, Israel's only 240 miles long. It's not. Israel's like from Naples to Tampa, so it's not a huge country. So Elisha hears about this, and it says, when Elisha, the man of God, heard that the king of Israel had torn his robes, he sent him this message: why have you torn your robes? Have the man come to me, and he will know that there's a prophet in Israel. Might be the last one living, because Naaman may have killed all the rest of them, but he'll know that there is a prophet in Israel. So Naaman went with his horses and chariots and stopped at the door of Elisha's house. Elisha sent a messenger to say to him, go wash yourself 7 times in the Jordan, and your flesh will be restored, and you will be cleansed. So Naaman goes to Elisha's house. And notice he travels with a motorcade. You see that? Horses, chariots, tanks, helicopters, okay? Naaman pulls up in a big Hummer and just pops out. Now the message he's sending is, remember, I'm the man, okay? Don't forget that, I'm the man. And these are the vehicles that's just been involved in decimating Israel. So Naaman waits for Elisha to come running out of the house. He thinks to himself, this is going to be the pinnacle of Elisha's career. He's going to get to heal me. He'll put this at the very top of his resume, okay? Meanwhile, Elisha's in the house. He's sitting in his Barco lounger. He's watching Jeopardy. Okay, he doesn't even get. Well, he wasn't watching Jeopardy, but and maybe wasn't called a Barco lounger back then. But he's sitting in his house. Okay, notice he doesn't even get up. He sends who outside? His messenger. He sends a servant. Elijah sends out an intern, and Naaman, who's used to everyone running to him, now he's having to start to learn a few things about humility. This is a lesson Naaman has never had to learn in his entire life. Intern says, go to the river Jordan and dunk yourself 7 times. Now listen to Naaman's response. But Naaman went away angry and said, I thought he would surely come out to me and stand and call on the name of the Lord his God and wave his hand over the spot and cure me of my leprosy. Are not Abana and Pharpar, the rivers of Damascus, better than any of these waters in Israel? Could not wash in them and be cleansed? So he turned and went off in a rage. Naaman says to himself, what kind of God is this? Who does this Elisha character think he is? I thought this was going to be a major production. He would come out in front of his house. Everybody would be watching. The cameras would be rolling. He'd wave his hands and pray with a big southern drawl and go, yes, yes, I've seen this hands. I've seen that hand. Because I've seen how this is done on TV. And he'd be famous for doing this. But he sends out some intern to tell me to go dump myself in a muddy little creek. River Jordan. Aren't Abana and Pharpar, my own country, better than the River Jordan? I mean, Naaman is now ditching the Jordan River now. I mean, how bad is that? So he turned and went off in a rage. Why? Wounded his pride. Wounded pride. He's offended. He has not been treated like a great man. Aren't you glad we don't have people that live like that down here where we're at today? Have you ever got those little buzzers when you go into a restaurant? You know, where they buzz it to let you know your table's ready? And you're sitting there, and you're sure that other people's buzzers are going off, and they got their buzzer after you got your buzzer. And what are you feeling as you're sitting there? You're feeling offended. You're saying, I want to talk. I want to speak to the manager. My name's Karen. Okay, you know why? Because your pride has been wounded. Somebody else may have gotten ahead of you. Okay, can't have that. He's offended. He hasn't been treated the way he should be treated. Now, and plus, he wasn't even asked to do anything really huge. Remember the huge guy? He wasn't even asked to do anything really huge. So that's not how you treat Naaman the Magnificent. No, I'm not going to do it. I'll die, but at least my pride will be intact. Boy, have I met people like that. You're looking at one of them. And he's, well, never mind. I'm supposed to call the doctor about something, and people say, well, did Gene call the doctor last week? And she goes, you don't know Gene, do you? No. He'll die first. Okay, but anyway. But wounded pride, I'll die before I give in. I'll die before I admit that I was wrong about something. There was this pond. Two ducks and a frog lived in this pond. And they played together. They were great friends. Well, the pond was dried up, summertime, and so they'd have to move. And the ducks realized they could fly to another pond, but they didn't want to leave their friend, the frog, behind. So the frog says, I got an idea. Why don't we put 2 ends of a stick in your bills, and then I'll hang on to the middle of the stick in my mouth, and then we can all fly to another pond. So I said, that's a great idea. So they did that. So they're flying, and a farmer in his field looks up, and he saw that strange formation, and he went, you know what? That's a clever idea. I wonder who thought of that. And all of a sudden the frog opened his mouth and went, I did. Splat. That's wounded pride. That's just subtle. The servants are huddled. Who's going to tell him? I'm not going to tell him. Who's going to tell him? And, we got these great stories. We see these stories in the Bible all the time. Who's successful and who has really failed? Who matters and who really doesn't matter? Who's first and who's last? In God's kingdom, very often it's those who simply serve that turn out to be the magnificent ones, the great ones. Those who puff themselves up with pride, who refuse to serve, who think they're so great. That they talk. They talk a good game. I've had retired people come up to me in Celebration Church, retired CEOs, and they said, I want to do something in the church. Use me. What board you want me to sit on? No, that's what's the first thing they always say. Well, what board do you want me to sit on? Am I right, Pastor Jason? Well, you know, what group do you want me to head? And I said to him, I said, well, you know what? We just had an announcement this morning that they're looking for greeters. You know, go back there, and Nancy will give you a yellow vest and give you a bucket, and and you can be a greeter. Never make it back there. Nope. Because, you know, those who humble themselves, those who serve, those are the ones who get exalted in God's kingdom. Verse 13. Naaman's servants went to him and said, my father, if the prophet had told you to do some great thing, would you not have done it? How much more then when he tells you, wash and be cleansed? I say, Naaman, if God had asked you to do something really huge, go win a battle, give away your fortune, conquer a nation, you would have done it. You know why you would have done it? Because you would use it to demonstrate your greatness. Look how much money I have given. You know, the getting ready, you can actually help pay for the Naples Pier. And for, I think it was, what was it, $5,000 or the little, you get a little $5,000, you can get your name, somebody a little plaque as you walk down the pier. Now there's 2 pavilions down there at the end for it's $50,000. $50,000 for the little plaques. Not $5,000, no, not $5,000. I don't talk about Naples. $50,000 just for the little plaque. Now, there's 2 pavilions. If you want to sponsor one of the pavilions and get your name on one of the pavilions, it's $500,000 each. Now, at the very end, there's the one big pavilion. Well, that one's open as well. And that one's going to go for between $2 and $5 million if you want to put your name on that. I would be surprised if they hadn't got them all sold by now. I really would. I guarantee they have. I guarantee they have. Because look, there's my name. Look at this great thing that I did. So, verse 13. So anyway, so Naaman, if God had asked you to do something big, you would have done it. So why not do this? And, you know, I thought about our world. I mean, nations fighting against nations and cultures and tribes and companies. You know, what would it be like if we just all decided we were going to find ways to just get up and serve each other every day? Just in, you know, what would your little world, what would my little world look like if every day I just said, you know what, I'm going to get up and I'm going to, you know, serve, get up, serve, repeat. Get up, serve, repeat. There it is. There's my plan for the rest of my life. Because there's something that happens when you serve, when you just humble yourself in service. It changes everything. Years ago, I took a group when I was associate pastor at East Naples Methodist, and I was a youth pastor, and I took a group of very pampered youth from Naples to do mission work at a homeless shelter in Atlanta, Georgia, downtown Atlanta. We were going to paint the whole shelter that week and do vacation Bible school for homeless kids. And we're going to stay in tents outside the shelter and then use the kitchen and bathroom facilities and all there and the shelter there. And it rained every day we were there. Those kids slept in mud that whole week. Now, these are kids that were upset. Not that they didn't have a car to drive to Naples High School. They did not have a new, right model car to drive to Naples High School. And you know what? I still see some of those kids here in town. They've all grown up. Just so proud of so many of them. And you know what they always love to talk about? Every time I see them, they always talk about one thing. They talk about that trip that they spent a week serving in a homeless shelter. When they sat there with some little kid kneeling in front of them, and they're plaiting their hair and pulling out lice at the same time. From Naples. You know, changes them. Humble things change you. In fact, one of the most humble things that ever happened to me involved one of those kids that grew up in that youth group. I was getting ready to go into surgery. They were going to reconnect my colon. So I was pretty much on my side, and I was naked. You just naked. I mean, that's the way it is. To the world. And as I'm staring at the wall, I hear this voice behind me go, Pastor Gene! And I went, oh no. One of the girls that had been in that youth group grew up and became a nurse, operator nurse. I said, hi, it's me. You talk about humbling. That was humbling. That was humbling. Now, God's going to cause us, all of us, that's what He's going to call us to do as we leave here. He's going to call us to do nothing huge, small things. Just something small. Run an errand for somebody, encourage somebody, pray for somebody. Remember that your time is not the most important thing in the world. And like I say, this is hard for me. This is just hard for me to do. I struggle a lot with patience, especially when I go into a store and there's like 15 people standing in front of the cash register. There's nobody there, and then somebody walks from the back of the store and they just stop and look like they're shocked that there'd be people that's wanting to check out, their store. I mean, Mother Teresa said this one time. She said, God doesn't ask us to do great things. He asks us to do small things with great love. That's just always been great. Naaman's problem is that he always want to be impressive. And God says, nope. Naaman, you're going to have to learn how to be obedient. And the servants asked Naaman this question. You do something big, but that's not what God's asking. Will you just obey and do something small? And I would love to be able to see this story at this point. I'd love to be able to look and watch Naaman at this point. Because on one side, you've got all the pride and self-sufficiency and achievement and independence and great wealth and prestige and power. And on the other side is this discolored little patch of skin. This little piece of reality that reminds him that he's not really in control of anything. And Naaman has to realize, I can't save myself. I can't earn it. I can't buy it. I can't do enough impressive deeds. God says, I'll save you. But if you're going to be cleansed, if you're going to be healed, you're going to have to swallow all that pride. You'll have to realize that all of your wealth and power and armies and abilities, that they don't mean nothing to me. I'll save you, Naaman, but it's going to be a gift. It's just grace. You got to decide. Will you surrender that stubborn will? Will you bend your knee? And will you say yes to me? And there he stands. Naaman the Magnificent, between life and death. Now here's Naaman. He's a pagan. He's an enemy of Israel. A killer of the people of God, even though God used Naaman as a judgment against Ahab. So God allowed Syria to come in and destroy the northern kingdom because they were to be punished for the wickedness of the Israeli people. But he's never worshipped in his life. God comes along and says, I'll save you. It's a gift. It's grace. Now Nathan wants to be whole. He bends the knee. He chooses life. He goes to the Jordan River, and this great general strips off all of his armor and plunges into the water like he's a little kid, up and down. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Seventh time he comes up and he looks, it's gone. And he says to Elisha, now I know. Now I know. Which, by the way, there's a whole bunch of the story doesn't give us, because somehow Elijah went down there and watched the whole thing, and there may have been a huge crowd there. I mean, all of Israel may have turned out for this thing. But he says to Elijah, now I know there is no God but this God, the God of Israel. And then here's what Naaman the Great said, and from this day forward, he will be my God. I won't be God of my life anymore. So what small thing is God asking you to do? Well, Gene, there's nothing really I can do for God. Well, maybe share with other people what God has done for you. Oh, that's why we got the Bible, Gene. Read the Bible. No, maybe they don't read the Bible. Maybe they don't believe in the Bible. Maybe the only Bible they'll ever read their entire life is you. And you're the one person that can try to describe to somebody that lives in the desert how deep the ocean is. They don't even believe in the concept of salt water, and you can explain to them the miracle of ocean life. You have to be the ocean for the people. You have to express your life in such a way that even though all anybody's ever seen is sandstorms for the last 20 years, when they're around you, they can't help but start to hear the waves. I had a going to close, and then I want to tell you, because there's one little end note before we leave this story, 2 Kings 5. Let me just share this story. I had a seminary professor who told us once that you make a sermon exciting by giving it an exciting title. So he said he wanted us to turn in a title that when it's put on a church sign, it would make a busload of people just stop to read it. So I turned in, "There's a bomb on your bus." And I did not get a good grade. He did not have a sense of humor. I thought it was just really funny. But the thing about it is, I guarantee you probably don't remember the sermon you heard last week. You might remember what you had for lunch, maybe. You know, and that's really depressing for me. But don't every now and then, you'll hear a sermon that'll stay with you for the rest of your life. And one sermon I'll never forget is a sermon that I heard, oh my goodness, 38 years ago, 88, 98, 2008, 30, over 30 years ago, when I graduated from graduate school. And this sermon had a huge impact, still does on my life. Here's what he said. Reverend Patterson was the guest speaker, best preacher for that day. He said, "Today is a good day, graduates." We were at chapel after graduation. And he says, "You'll leave and have lunch with your family and celebrate. But someday you're going to die." How's that for something to say on your graduation day? But someday you're going to die. And people are going to go to your funeral. Then afterwards, they're going to go back to the church and they're going to eat potato salad. But as they're eating potato salad, are they going to talk about your degree? Or are they going to talk about your life? Are they going to talk about your titles and your accomplishments? Or are they going to talk about your life testimony and what a difference you made in the world? If they're only going to talk about your title or your master's degree, you better have a lot of potato salad. And I've remembered that for the rest of my life. You know, if you're a servants don't get to pick and choose where they serve. Being a servant means that you're giving up the right to control your schedule. Allow God to interrupt it whenever it needs to. Wake up, serve, repeat. Now, it's 4 after 8, 1 minute, and now this is it. This is the whole, the entire story of Naaman. Because the story doesn't end right there. It goes, but Gehazi, how's that for a name? Gehazi. But Gehazi, the servant of Elisha, the man of God, said, "Look, my master has spared Naaman the Syrian, while not receiving from his hands what he brought. But as the Lord lives, I will run after him and take something from him." So Gehazi pursued Naaman. When Naaman saw him running after him, he got down from the chariot to meet him and said, "Is all well?" And he said, "All is well. My master has sent me." Liar, liar, liar. Master did not see. Gehazi saw all that gold and all that silver and all them clothes. And he's going, "I can't believe you didn't take any of it. I just can't believe it. Not one shekel, none of it." The reason that Elisha, and he was offered it, Elisha refused all of it because Elisha knew that God wanted to make sure that Naaman understood that this was a gift. Grace is a gift. You can't buy it. You can't earn it. But now Gehazi is going to end up fouling up the whole thing. Because my master has sent me, saying, "Indeed, just now 2 young men of the sons of the prophets have come to me from the mountains of Ephraim. Please give them a talent of silver and 2 changes of garments." So Naaman said, "Please take 2 talents. A talent's 120 pounds of silver. Take 240 pounds of silver." And he urged him and bound 2 talents of silver in 2 bags with 2 changes of garments and handed them to 2 of his servants. And they carried them on ahead of him because Gehazi couldn't carry all that. When they came to the citadel, this was a little church area outside of town, he took them from their hand and stored them away in the house. Then he let the men go and they departed. Okay, a lot of silver. Stored them away. Why did not he bring it to Elisha's house? Because he knew Elisha. This is because, remember, God was making it a point for Elisha not to take this. Gehazi knew what he was doing was really wrong. Now he went in and stood before his master. Elisha said to him, "Where did you go, Gehazi?" And he said, "Your servant did not go anywhere." This Gehazi, he lies and lies and lies. Then he said to him, Did not my heart go with you when the man turned back from his chariot to meet you? Is it time to receive money and to receive clothing, olive groves and vineyards? In other words, Gehazi, I know you just didn't want the gold and silver. You wanted it so you could buy you some olive groves. You could buy you some vineyards, sheep and oxen, male and female, so you could have your own servants. Therefore, the leprosy of Naaman shall cling to you and your descendants forever. And he went out from his presence, leprous, as white as snow. And that's how the story ends. Elijah said, you want what Naaman brought? Fine. He brought gold, he brought silver, he brought clothes, he brought leprosy. So you take leprosy. You read this in commentaries, and some commentaries said this was a severe judgment. Well, this is something that I think about every day. I think if you are in ministry, you're going to be under stricter judgment. I really do. I think when he allowed himself to covet what Naaman had, totally circumventing the lesson on grace that God wanted Naaman to learn, that God allowed him. You know, it never said he had to take this gold and silver back. I think God allowed him to keep the 2 talents of silver, the 2 changes of clothes. But I think he also allowed him to keep something else. Remember how I said all those little dots would join together? He left there, his entire body was already as white as snow. But that's the story of Naaman, one of our lesser knowns. Let's close in prayer. God, our prayer tonight is just you be in control of us, of what we do every day, of Celebration Church. Father, you be in control. You be in our life. You know, Father, it's much easier to do something big for you than to do something small for you. I think if I went to somebody and I said, God said that you should give $1 million, that'd be easier for someone than to say, God says that you should give $1 million, but you should give it away $10 a day out of your own time. We'd much rather do something big than to do something small. So tonight, God, thank you for the story of Naaman. Help us that we can walk the best as we can through life as your servant. God, just help us to wake up, serve, and repeat. Thank you again for the rain. Let us all drive safely home tonight, Father. Be with us till we meet together once again. We pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen. I don't know who we're going to talk about next week, so come back. But it may be Athaliah. I don't know, because that one's kind of the one that everybody's kind of asking about. That means we'll talk about Ahab, the Arab, and the funky monkey named Clyde. No, we will talk about Ahab and Jezebel, and I'll tell you why I think that Athaliah, can't even say her name now, is just not only the most wicked woman in the Bible, one of the most wicked people in the entire Bible. So, come back next week. Yep. Weather should be good.